But one of the things that Gene would always say, and he'd tell recruits this. It's like, hey, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to win national championships. We're going to do this. If you want to be a part, that's great. If not, we're going to do it anyway. Somebody else will take that spot.
Running low on fuel shouldn't slow you down. That's where Juice Fuel comes in. Wichita's convenient mobile fueling service that brings the gas station straight to you. Whether you're managing a fleet, running a job site, or just don't have time to stop and fill up, Juice Fuel delivers fuel directly to your vehicles, saving you time, money, and hassle. No detours, no downtime, no waiting in line. Download the Juice Fuel app, visit juicefuel.com/Wichita, or give them a call at 316-402-2246 to learn more. You know, it's not every day the winningest pitching coach in Division I history sits in your basement. Brent, thank you for coming over and sitting with us.
That's a perfect tee up. If I couldn't have written that script any better. So thank you for that perfect intro. My pleasure.
In your 38 years as pitching coach, honors and accomplishments and awards for your staff were commonplace. Twice, Wichita State led the NCAA in ERA. The Shockers' 1982 team had an NCAA record with 46 complete games, while leading the nation with a 2.53 ERA. And the 91 staff led the NCAA with a 2.91 ERA. During your time, the Shockers made 7 College World Series appearances and won the 1989 championship. Not a bad resume.
Well, and you know when it's going on, and I was pitching coach 38 years, as you mentioned, to say you don't enjoy it is not true, because you do. And like you said, 7 trips to Omaha, won the national championship, amazing records. And I do appreciate the winningest pitching coach. That's the intro I love. But I did enjoy the journey, but when you're in the middle of it, you're always like, next year. When the season was over, regardless, whether it was the national championship in 89 or a national runner-up in 82, 91, 93, the minute the season was over, I'm recruiting. That was my therapy. It's like, okay, you say goodbye to the players, the seniors, and say, hey, man, give me a hug. You may tear up. The juniors, some of them were going to get drafted. The other guys, you were sending them out to pro ball. Not to pro ball, but to summer league. And saying, okay, here are the things you got to get better at, you got to work on. And I'd always say, hey, you're going to get either better or worse. You won't come back the same. It totally depends on what you put into it. And then when that was done, and it may be the day we got back, I was recruiting. I was in my car, and I was more of a drive than a fly guy. But I'd load up and go to Denver or Oklahoma City or Kansas City, wherever, to see players. So that was my drug, my therapy, whatever term you want to use, from the year before, and it got you focused on next year. And I loved it. It was fun. But with that being said, it's always like, okay, we had a great year. We've had a great run. But what do we need for next year? So when you retire from coaching, and I've been retired from it 10 years, I still work at Wichita State as an assistant AD. But you look back and you go, man, we had a heck of a run. And it's fun for me because I'm still at basketball games, baseball games. I'm going to see people, and everybody like, Coach, man, that was, they'll bring up a year, and you're like, oh, man, I love these stories. But the thing that sticks with you, the record's great, and the trips to Omaha and all that, it's wonderful. Don't think it's not. But the thing that sticks with you that I love about coaching and what I do now are the relationships. That's what's priceless.
Yeah. Back in the 80s and 90s, when you talk about recruiting, how'd you hear about guys back then?
Well, I grew up in Oklahoma, and Perry, Oklahoma, graduated 74, and I was a huge Oklahoma Sooners fan, okay? Mainly football, but baseball, basketball, whatever. And Gene Stevenson was the assistant and at OU before he came to Wichita State. So Gene, and we can talk about that more later if you want to, but that's how I got to Wichita State, reaching out to Gene. But I remember my first fall in 1978, I'm a 21-year-old graduate assistant. I'd played small college baseball, and Gene Stevenson, who was like legendary for me, Oklahoma assistant, everybody knew he was a great baseball guy, and now he's at Wichita State. I remember that first fall, he handed me a list of professional scouts, and it was like 4 or 5 pages, probably 67 pro scouts. Keep in mind, I'm 21. And I'm like, man, these are pro scouts. This is like the coolest thing ever. And a lot of them were ex-big league players. So I recognized a lot of the names. Well, I was very aggressive to go out and introduce myself, even at 21, and get to know these guys, because Gene said, these are the guys you need to build relationships, with. And we have a lot of avenues to find players. A lot of it's, people But he said the core of who we recruit are professional scouts. So to answer your question, professional scouts was the number one go-to when we started, looking for players and asking about players, because you get names all the time. So you'd bounce from all pro scouts, and over time you figure out, okay, this guy's word's awesome. He's never missed. This guy, maybe some. This guy doesn't want to tell you anything. So you build relationships, but it was with pro scouts primarily.
Back then, could you go straight from high school to professional baseball?
Yes, still can. So a lot of guys would get drafted out of high school and could go into minor league baseball. There's just a handful that went straight from high school to the big leagues. I think of David Clyde, 1973. I mean, there's probably a couple others, and a couple college guys like Darren Dreifert did. But for the most part, it was either sign, but they send you to the minor leagues. It's not like you're going to the big leagues unless you're like a David Clyde. But so as a college guy, you're like trying to, in some cases, get guys that were drafted and offered money and trying to get them to come to school and pay what, because there weren't fulls. I mean, you could give a full, but most guys, you split up the scholarships. So it was one of those deals. The pro guys would tell you names, but a lot of times it was guys that probably needed to go to school. But they're at the ballpark every day. You're coaching, so you're not able to go to games every day for recruiting. You're going to the park every day, but it's to coach your guys. Okay, but the pro guys live in ballparks, and we did in the summer, but they do it, pretty much year round. So they would give you leads on guys, and a lot of times it was guys that are like maybe 2 or 3 years away from being able to handle the pro situation. So that's where you got the names. But yeah, you could sign out of high school, but we would try to convince guys that we replaced the lower minor leagues. We're going to do a better job of developing you. And as a junior, when you're eligible again, or 21, you're going to be more ready to handle it mentally.
So you got to WSU a year after Gene was hired, correct?
Yes.
I didn't know WSU disbanded their baseball program from 70 to 77. So when Gene got hired, he and you basically built this program from nothing. Literally nothing. You hear that all the time, like, oh, we built something, brick by brick. But your guys' case, it quite literally from nothing.
Yes, true story. And Gene, he takes the job in March of 77. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm a Perry High School guy. My dream's to go to OU, and I talked to Oklahoma State, and I played American Legion ball in Stillwater, but I did talk to them and had a bunch of JUCO offers, a lot of small college offers. Ended up going to a really good small school, the great baseball program, Phillips University. But I remember my senior year at Phillips, which was the fall of 77. Keep in mind that they hired Gene in March of 77. And then my spring of 78, reality kicked in for me that I'm not going to be this pro big league guy. I had a nice college career, really good high school career, but it was like, okay, this pro thing's not going to happen. So I'm like, I'm not ready to go out in the real world. I don't want a job, I don't want to, a lot of college kids are like, oh, I can't wait to get out of college and get a job. I wasn't that guy. I was like, I like school. I like college. So I started looking for places to go to grad school. and be like a graduate assistant for a baseball program. So I wrote Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Arkansas, and Wichita State. Initially, it was just Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Arkansas. And it was the old school, write the letter out. It isn't this, the way they do it now. It was old school penmanship. It was hard to read because my writing wasn't very good. But I remember going to my coach, who was a legendary small college NAIA coach, a guy named Joe Record, who's in the NAIA Hall of Fame and was a great coach. I remember going to him and saying, Coach Record, my dreams to play pro ball. I'm pretty sure I was 8-0 as a junior and didn't get drafted. So reality kicked in. Okay, this probably isn't going to happen. All right. Which was a blessing because I could spend my senior year wrapping up my degree and looking for places to go to grad school. So I told him what I was doing. He said, oh, that's great. That makes sense. I think you've got a chance to be a really good coach, and that's good. He said, but I would add one school to your list. He said, I would add Wichita State. He said, they're starting up a baseball program, and they hired Gene Stevenson. Of course, I knew who Gene Stevenson was because I loved OU. He said, write them, because for them to hire him, they must be serious. So I added Gene, wrote him a letter, and I heard from the other schools, but the one that gave me the best response, very personal, letter written back, was Gene Stevenson. And this is before they had played one spring. And yes, they dropped it in 70, brought it back in 77. That was the year he just recruited players. So the first team was the spring of 78, which was my senior year in college. But Gene reached out to me that winter, and I remember driving up here in my 74 Firebird, and it stayed with a friend of mine at Dewbey, and I said, hey, I got a meeting tomorrow with the coach of Wichita State. I'm interested in coming up here to grad school. So I stayed with a buddy in Dewbey, and I remember talking to Gene on the phone, and he said, all right, I'm going to meet you at Henry Leavitt Arena, and he was giving me directions on how to get there. Okay, keep in mind, they hadn't played yet because it's December of 77, and I'm a senior in college. So I remember him giving me directions, and he said, all right, you're in Dewbey, right? And I said, yes. He said, okay, go north down Rock Road, and you're going to go all the way to 21st Street. So you're at 21st and Rock. Keep in mind, this is 77. He said, you're going to feel like you're out in the middle of the country. But trust me, that's how far you need to go, and then take a left and go to 21st Street and Henry Leavitt Arena. So it always amuses me when I tell that story because, as you know, 21st and Rock, that area is just, plenty of businesses, etc. But I met with him, and he showed me around campus, and I'll never forget him telling me exactly what he was going to do. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. And at that point, he was gracious enough to meet me and spend time with me, which I thought was really cool. But he just laid it out. Here's what we're going to do. And he did it. And I remember I stayed in touch with him. And my break was, my college pitching coach was a guy named Bill Brown, who had coached Gene in an American Legion All-Star team in 1961. And Gene played for him. And Gene had a lot of respect for Bill Brown. He was a legendary American Legion coach. So anyway, Bill gave me a great recommendation. I stayed in touch with Gene, and I remember talking to him in his office in April of 78 when Phillips University is getting ready to play them at McAdams, and I'm pitching. Okay? So anyway, great conversation. They did beat me, and I got reminded of that many times, but I did pitch well. So anyway, we stayed in touch, and he still didn't offer me a position, but here's what I did. I said, look, I'm coming to Wichita State because they had a sports administration program. And I knew that you're not going to turn down a guy that's coming. Who's going to turn down free help? Well, I had no leverage. It's not like I could say, well, let me decide if your offer is good enough. I knew I had no leverage. Other than I'm 21, eager, had a great recommendation from my pitching coach who knew Gene and was willing to come. So I said, well, I'm coming to Wichita State. You have a great sports administration program. I'd love to help. Well, he took it. It's like, who's going to turn down free help? Because I remember my college coach, Joe Records, saying, look, you can get places, but it comes out of their budget. So for you to get money is a little optimistic. But if you say you're going to go there and you're going to school there and you'd want to help, nobody's going to turn that down. So I knew I needed that to get my foot in the door, and that's the break I got. That summer, I was like, okay, I'm coming to Wichita State, made plans, lived in the dorm, and was going to be a GA for baseball.
How quickly did you become the pitching coach and just oriented with the baseball team on the staff?
Perfect tee up. Thank you. Here was the other break I got. I thought I was going to come in here and, shag balls and hit fungos and do laundry and all the stuff that 21-year-old GAs do. And I was fine with it. Hey, if I'm around it and I'm getting my foot in the door, let's go. Well, the break I got is he made me pitching coach.
At 21?
At 21. Now, here's how that happens. It's a new program, so they don't have past players that are maybe ex-pros or whatever. They don't have money to go hire a real dude. So you have a GA that has a pitching background and a pitching coach that endorsed me, my coach endorsing me. So he said, I'm going to make you the pitching coach. Now, it's not like at 21, he's like, okay, whatever you want to do is great. But Gene empowered me. He, it's not like he didn't bring in pro guys to talk to him in the winter and get some feedback. And he was always, encouraging me, hey, you need to go talk to this guy. Like I said, he encouraged me to get with pro scouts. I mean, he did a lot of things that were for my own growth, which I loved. But he did make me the pitching coach. So I'm 21, living in the dorm. I had dudes on the pitching staff older than me, but I'm their pitching coach. My roommate was Bruce Hurdle, if you remember the old Channel 12 guy.
Sure.
We're still great friends. So anyway, that was like, okay, if you want to prove yourself, go for it. Well, the year before, and I didn't know this till I got here, the team ERA was real high. It was like 6.22. And the guy that dealt with the pitchers was one of Gene's old pitchers from the University of Oklahoma, but he was a pro guy that just came here in the off season to kind of help. And then he had to leave. So they didn't have a true pitching coach in the spring. But the ERA was like 6.22, really high. And I looked at that and I go, okay, I had no idea what it was, but it was high. So that gave me a great opportunity to lower it and make a difference. Well, the first thing I did, it's not like at 21 you have this pitching coach philosophy. So what I did is I treated it like I was a senior. And you have all these young guys. And I had done this, I did the same thing when I was in college. With the young guys, I kind of took them under my wing, kind of like the seniors did with me when I was a freshman. So I took it as, okay, give these guys confidence. They're going to love you if you pump them up. Dude, that's nasty stuff. Let's go. Nobody can hit that. So I pumped them up and gave them confidence. And so they immediately like, man, I like this guy. And don't ask me why, but I would stand up to Gene too. If he'd get negative, I go, no, you can't know. I got it. Well, if you know Gene Stevenson, and he told me this many times, he didn't want yes men. He wanted guys that had a little personality, had a little flair, had a little, some confidence. Well, it was probably false confidence, but I did. And Gene liked that. There'd be some days I'd think, oh my, I went too far yesterday. And I'd come in and he'd go, no, I like that. That means you care, So he empowered me. But my first year, we went from 6.22 to like 3.26. So the team ERA was like almost in half. And I'm still living in the dorm. Well, the second year, it's going to be the last year of my master's degree. So that's going to be done. And the second year, I did actually get some GA money. The first year, it was work-study money. And I'd worked in the oil field the summer before just to have money, okay? And was working camps, whatever. Well, then after 2 years, my degree's going to be up. Well, the plan I had when I came here was I'd mentioned that I talked to Arkansas, Norm Bryan. Well, the plan was that, all right, I'm going to go to Wichita State 2 years, and then I'll go to Arkansas to work on my doctorate. Well, my 2 years mastered, I was over the school thing. That was all right. That's plenty. So fortunately, the guy that was a full-time assistant, a guy named Terry Jolly, had decided he was getting out of coaching. So Gene told me, he said, hey, Jolly's going to be here this year, but he's getting out of coaching. He said, if you'll hang one more year, and I already have my degree, so I was, basically working camps and selling tickets, season tickets for commission, just doing odds and ends stuff. And he said, if you'll hang that third year, I will hire you full time. And I was already pitching coach, but it was like I was a GA. Okay. So the third year I was still a GA, but I had my degree, my master's. So then he held to his word. Terry Jolly got out of coaching, and it was August of 1981. And I still have the contract in my office, my first contract, and I became the full-time assistant. So now I'm 24, okay? But I remember thinking, oh, my God, I'm full-time assistant, Division I school, and pitching coach. So those are priceless memories. I love telling that story. So that's kind of the beginning of Wichita State.
Wow. You're a GA, and you probably have the second most important job on that staff.
When you're pitching
What
coach,
a start for you.
well, here's what I joke with people. I say this jokingly. I say, Gene didn't know if I was any good. He just didn't want to deal with pitchers. It's like, hey, get those pitchers out of here. But here's one thing. I had the confidence from my coach in college. I'm Bill Brown. And I had an American Legion pitching coach in Stillwater, a guy named Tom Borland. And he was a big leaguer, ex-big league guy from the Red Sox and an All-American at Oklahoma State. And he was my pitching coach in American Legion baseball. He's one of the 4 numbers retired Oklahoma State baseball. You look at their long history, it's amazing there's only 4, but they have Gary Ward, Robin Ventura, Pete Incaviglia, and Tom Borland. And most people are like, well, who's Tom Borland? Well, that was my American Legion pitching coach, and I lived in his brain. And he was so great to me, always patient with me, because I said, I'd love to play in the big leagues. I don't know if I'll be good enough, and obviously I wasn't, but I'd like to get into coaching. So he was constantly giving me information, and no question, was painful for him to ask. I love the guy. Same with Bill Brown. So I had some confidence with the whole coaching thing. So when he gave it to me, I was like, all right, I better run with this. And each year I grew. It's not like, had all the answers, but I was one of those guys that was constantly, I mentioned with scouts, but when other teams would come in, if they had a pitching coach that had a little history, I'd make a point to go visit with them and just continue to grow. So yes, pitching coach, I totally agree. It's like pitching and defense is going to be the key, and that's still the case 100 years later. So yeah, I had a huge role, and I was the GA. Well, then I was like the paid assistant, and it was Gene and me as a paid, and then we had a couple GAs.
You guys went from non-existent program to the NCAA tournament in 3 years. How did you get so good so quickly?
Well, when I came here, the team, they were, I think the year before I got here, the only year I wasn't with Gene, and we've talked about that. They were 43-30. And then my first year, which was fall of 78, spring of 79, we were 65-15. Well, in those days, unlimited games. And Gene was like, let's go play every day. And there was no limit on games. Now, we did play some bigger. We had Southern Cal came in. I'm not sure how Gene convinced them to come in. We played home and home with Oklahoma State. I mean, there was some good opponents, but a lot of small schools, a lot of teams that weren't that great. But there was a mix of some really good teams. So the first year, 65-15, we did not win the Missouri Valley tournament, which was automatic qualifier, and we did not get an at-large because it was a glossy record, but on paper, it was a lot of small schools that really weren't that good. So the third year, 1980, we won the Valley tournament and went to Oral Roberts. That was our first of 28 trips to the NCAA tournament. and we lost, I think, 5-4 to Missouri, and maybe 5-2 or 5-1 to I think it was UNLV. But really, and Oral Roberts, I think, won that regional. But that was the string of, okay, let's go. And 81, they sent us to Clemson, South Carolina. Joe Carter was a junior. He was the second pick in that draft, and we had a pretty loaded team in 81, but did not win. And then we got wiped out. We had a lot of that first recruiting class that Gene had that either graduated or signed. So it was a thinner group, but we feel like we had recruited well. So in 82, we had a lot of seniors that stuck around: Charlie O'Brien, Phil Stevenson, Jimmy Thomas, Don Heinkel on the mound. We had some talented younger guys and went to the finals of the College World Series in 82.
Yeah, 1982.
That's amazing.
Wichita State set an NCAA record for wins in a single season at 73. Advancing, like you said, to the College World Series for the first time. After a 4-6 start, you guys won 20 straight games and ended up falling to Miami in the championship game. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's another interesting story. Keep in mind, that's my first year as a full-time assistant. It's my fourth year as pitching coach, but 3 years was on paper at GA. Well, that's my first year as a full-time, so I'm feeling pressure. It's like, I'm a full-time guy now, so you better deliver. Well, we went and played, and this didn't change over the years. We went south and played Arizona State, got beat down there pretty handily 3 times, lost twice at the University of Texas. We did lose to split with St. Edwards, and like I said, it was 4-6, so kind of limped in, but it was a killer schedule. And I thought, okay, we have some veteran proven guys. I'd mentioned Charlie O'Brien, Phil Stevenson, Don Heinkel on the mound, and we had some younger talented guys. Okay, so it's late February and we're 4-6. So we come back to Wichita and we get on one heck of a roll. Now here's what was fun is we had Arizona State coming back to Wichita in May and beat them 2 out of 3. Okay? Cal State Fullerton came in, and that was a loaded team in those years. Beat them 2 out of 3. So when we go into postseason play, we are confident as you can get because with that whole 4-6 start was distant memory. Mm-hmm. So we win those games in May, go to the Valley Tournament in Indiana State, dominate, and Indiana State had a really good team. Go to the regional in New Orleans. That was when I really started getting close and became good friends with Mike Kennedy. He started doing their games on a regular basis. Well, New Orleans is loaded. They have a guy named Augie Schmidt, who I think was the second pick. And New Orleans was like the toast of the city. They had a great team. So it was New Orleans, Jackson State, Tulane right there in New Orleans, and us. We beat Jackson State 3-0. We beat New Orleans, I think, 8-0. And then beat them 8-1. So in 3 games, in 82, we give up 1 run in the whole regional. Okay? And so it's our first trip to Omaha. And we're like, oh, my God, this is the best thing ever. So, started out slow, got on a roll, big-time confidence at the end, and then made it to the finals against Miami, and they beat us 82. A lot of people, a couple of the polls still ranked us 1 after the season because it's like we were so loaded. We had great pitching. It led the nation in ERA. As you mentioned earlier, 46 complete games, still an NCAA record. And then our offense, great defense. And that's priceless memories. But so that's 5 years into the program. We're playing for a national championship.
That is truly amazing. The program starts back up in 77, and 5 years later, you're in the national championship game in Omaha.
Yes.
At Wichita State.
Right.
And unreal. This isn't Oklahoma. It kind of is now because of what you guys did, but
right.
That's a dream scenario.
Well, everything about it, and Gene loves telling the story. We didn't have anything when we came here. No balls, no bats, no fields. I mean, I've heard that story from Gene 1,000 times, and it never gets old, you know? It's like, oh, my God, here we go with Gene. And he'll tell people that haven't heard the story, and they're hanging on every word, and he loves telling it, but it's a fun story. But, yes, and I give Gene so much credit because nothing was going to stop Gene. I told you when I came here in December of 77 to talk to him, he told me what he was going to do, and nothing was going to get in his way. When he did finally offer me a position, and it was work study money, it's not like you had a salary, and I'm a student, but the break I got was he gave me the pictures, but it was one of those deals like, we can do this with or without you. If you want to be a part, it's going to be something special. And that's what Barry Switzer used to say in recruiting. You know, growing up in Oklahoma as an Oklahoma football fan, loved Barry Switzer. And I heard so many Barry Switzer stories from Gene because Gene actually recruited for Oklahoma football for Barry. Okay, so I never got tired of hearing the Barry Switzer stories. But one of the things that Gene would always say, and he'd tell recruits this. It's like, hey, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to win national championships. We're going to do this. If you want to be a part, that's great. If not, we're going to do it anyway. Somebody else will take that spot. Well, that was kind of Gene's deal. That was kind of like, if you want this opportunity, it's for you, and that'd be beautiful. I don't think you'd ever regret it, but we're going to do it with or without you. So it was his swag, and if you know Gene at all, it's like ultra, confident, and people didn't like us. You know, we had swag when we go onto the field, and we knew we were going to win, and we enjoyed doing it, So it wasn't like we were loved by everybody, but we fed off Gene.
That is right where you want to be, though. Right where you want to be.
And you know what's great about that is telling it now that it was 38 years, and you look back, and it was a great run, and thank you for the tee-up early, given the numbers. It's like, oh, that was pretty cool. But it's like now you look back, and it's, you have people like, man, we came to the games, and there are people that I consider to be old or older for sure. It's like, oh, yeah, you sat on the hill as a kid and, watch you. Or I came to your camp, and I'm thinking, that looks like an old man, and he said he came to my camp. I get that all the time, which you love it. I mean, it's fun, But yes, just priceless. And then that's a huge factor. 48 years later, I'm still in Wichita. I love this place. Grew up in Oklahoma, but this is home. It's priceless.
Was the baseball field at the same place it is now back then?
Yeah, Gene loves telling that story. It's like it was just like a vacant lot. It was like there was a golf course, if we remember, where they now have the Innovation Campus. It was Braeburn, but it was a golf course. Well, we were like the driving range where the field is now. And initially it was just, they did have a turf field, grass outfield, chain link fence, and in the early years, it was like old railroad cars, and they set bleachers on top of them. And I've heard many people talk about, hey, you sat on those old railroad cars, and Gene did have a blueprint of what the stadium was supposed to look like. And there's a beautiful story around that because he'd show recruits, he'd say, okay, here's a stadium that we plan on building. Well, it came like multiple years later, and the fun story is Joe Carter, because he showed it to Joe. Joe was a football/baseball recruit that Gene had an in on from the Oklahoma days. So they snuck in Gene as a football sign. A guy named Philip Fulmer went on to be the Tennessee head coach for a lot of years. He was on the football staff, recruited Oklahoma. Well, they got Joe. Okay, so one of the deals when they were recruiting Joe as a football, as a football scholarship guy, but obviously a great baseball talent, they showed Joe the plans of, okay, here's what we're going to build. It's going to be amazing. Well, Joe's story now is, they showed me these plans of this great stadium. What they didn't tell me is I was going to have to pay for it. Because Joe's one of the big guys that's helped fund it, getting it going. Because they didn't. He tells that story all the time, and it's beautiful. Yeah, they didn't tell me I was going to have to write a check for it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
In 1988, you have another great season. Get back to the College World Series. Mark Stanford, Sluggers, very well known in Wichita. Eric Wedge, former big leaguer, former big league manager. PJ Forbes, big leaguer, friend of the program. And ended up falling to Arizona State, another awesome team.
Yes, I get asked a lot. They say, okay, I assume winning the national championship game against Texas in '89 was the biggest win in program history. And the answer is yes, that's true. They say, okay, what's number 2? And I said, well, okay, winning it is 1, but not by as big a margin as you might think. 1988, they send us to Stillwater for a regional. In those years, there's 6-team regionals, and I love putting us in Oklahoma State. You know, we went there in 83, we went there in 85, it's 88, we're loaded, have a good team. They're ranked number 1 in the country. They had gone to the College World Series 7 years in a row. Gary Ward has a great program. Okay, so we're going to Stillwater, and I grew up, as I mentioned, 20 minutes from there and played American Legion, so I knew the world. And you go down there, and it's on, because here are the Shockers coming in, and we're not intimidated by anybody. And one of the big deals with Oklahoma State is, they intimidate you. They had swag, and they were legit. So we go in there in 88 and beat them to end their string of 7 trips to the College World Series. And they had Robin Ventura. They had, Monty Ferris. They had this loaded team. And as you mentioned, we were good, too. We had 4 seniors. We had Stanford, Danny Rayleigh, on the pitching staff, Shane Durham, and David Haas. So we had 4 pillar seniors. And you mentioned Forbes, and Wedge was a junior catcher, and Mears was younger, but we had some really good guys as well. All right, so it's one of those deals. And we had Brummett, who was a junior in 88. So we had a really good team. Jim Newland, he was a really good closer, not as good as he was in 89, but we weren't intimidated. Because you walk in there, and I remember Gene when we walked in the park. He says, I don't care, whatever. We're not intimidated. We go in here, and we're going to do this, and this. And our guys fed off that. I know I did. So you go in there with swag, and people, they weren't crazy about you because we went in there to win. It wasn't one of those happy to be in a regional deals. So we won the big game to win it, and that's the second biggest win in program history. So then we go to Omaha and have the crushing defeat to Arizona State, where we were 1 strike away several times. They kept fouling pitches off, and we finally lose in extra innings and get 3rd. If we win that game, we have a fresh Greg Brummett going against Stanford in the finals. We might have won in 88 and 89. So anyway, that sting of 88, a lot of people will say is what drove us in 89, because that wears that. You go to Omaha, you make a run. It was a great year, but you don't think about the crazy record. You think about that Arizona State, Ricky Candelaria just fouling pitch off, and then finally gets a little loop base hit, and you don't get the win. Well, that stuck with us. And I mentioned the 4 seniors, and they were all legit. David Haas, Shane Durham, Danny Rayleigh, and Stanford. But we had a great core coming back. And, man, did we fed off that 88, and as you know, won it in 89.
When you say that fans and opposing teams didn't like Wichita State because of its swagger or whatever, what do you mean specifically by that? Like, what did you guys do to kind of inflame them?
Me and Shane Dennis did a national podcast in this past fall. I think it was late September, with Mike Rooney. And Mike's a national name in college baseball. And he asked me and Shane to come on his national show and do a podcast. So we're sitting there doing this live on nationally, and he asked the same question. He said, okay, Wichita State, I played against you when I was at Notre Dame, and you guys had this swag. Seemed like every pitcher was 92 plus, and, you were deep, and every guy could, fly, and, it was like you're bigger than life. And so you got to have talent. I mean, don't let any coach say, well, I coached him up, which you can, and especially mentally, and continue to have them grow physically. And I've always said the brain is the biggest difference maker. So we had talent, but we just had, when I say swag, we walked in. I use that term, and somebody said, swag, that's a tire. That's shirts and stuff. I know they use that term now. But for me, swag was just bouncing your step, confidence. Nobody's going to beat us. That eye of the tiger look. So we fed off that, and we did have a deep pitching staff, and we always put some bona fide, the Dreiferts and the Newlands and the Bloomis in the bullpen, the Loopers. And so what people would say, and Mike said, well, what was your, what'd you teach? I said, well, people that played against us, and I remember Jim Hendry, who was a legendary Creighton coach those years, went on to be the GM for the Cubs, still works with the Yankees. He said, Wichita State speeds the game up on you. And it's like, okay, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Well, from an offensive standpoint, you get guys up and down the lineup that can run, which Gene always wanted athletes, guys that can run. You had to come in a step as a shortstop. Even a drag or a bunt, you got to speed it up. If you got a guy that can really run on first base, you try to be quicker to the plate. So maybe all of a sudden you're throwing more fastballs. So we had guys that could really run. And then from a pitching standpoint, we'd have our horses in the pen. So it would shorten the game. People would play us and they go, oh, got to score early. When they go to Dreifert, it's done. We're not scoring on him. When they go to Jim Newland, done. 89, he was 5-0, Jim Newland, with 18 saves and a 1.08 ERA. When he was handed the ball, everybody knew it was over. So we sped up the game on you and just had amazing confidence / swag.
It's amazing what speed can do to a baseball game. Like you said, if you get a guy on first base, the next hitter's probably going to see a lot more fastballs. You can expect fastball coming in because it's obviously quicker to home and
yes,
take second base.
And how much it's got to screw with the pitcher knowing a speedster's on first. And
100%.
Right, you can't see him really. And
you can't see him, and you're trying to do all your stuff to eliminate the running game. And, yeah, you're going to throw more fastballs, and you're trying to be quicker to the plate than you probably are comfortable with, and you probably haven't dealt with that much. So that was definitely the case. But what helped us from a pitching standpoint is all fall we were playing inter-squad games. So our guys had to learn how to deal with that. I remember talking to Lou Brock. Gene Stevenson used to put on these amazing clinics when I first came in here. And it was a who's who group of legendary people that would come in for his clinics. And one of them was Lou Brock. Please tell me you know who Lou Brock is. When I tell young people this, a lot of people are like, who's that? Well, at the time, 1980, when Gene brought him in, he was like the best base stealer in the history of Major League Baseball, Cardinal. Bob Newts would know him. So it's one of those deals where I picked up Lou Brock at the airport, and I'm driving him to the hotel. So I'm a 21-year-old or 22 at the time, and I'm picking Lou Brock's brain. I'm like, oh, my God, I got to tell all my buddies I got Lou Brock in the car. That was before cell phones or you couldn't take pictures. So I couldn't wait to get to a landline and say, well, I just talked to Lou Brock. Everybody's like, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. So anyway, but I remember asking Lou, I said, okay, you're the best base stealer in baseball. What do you hate from a pitcher? So you're talking to the best base stealer. You want to know what they hate from a pitcher.
that's a great question.
Right? So I was kind of proud of myself. So I asked him that. He said, that's a great question. He said, I hate guys that freeze you. In other words, they just hold it, where you kind of lock you up. He said, I hate guys that throw over to first base hard, where you have to dive back. And they said, I hate guys that vary it up. One time they step off. One time they immediately throw. One time they do something different. He said, I love the guys you dance with. It's one boom, throw. One boom, throw. He said, you can dance with those guys. So I thought that was great information. But, and then obviously you got to be quick to the plate. But I used that theory and stuck with that my whole coaching career. But getting back to our original, comments, playing inter squads against our guys that could fly made our pitchers where they could deal with that because they were used to it.
Man, so you brought up the sour taste from 88 going into 1989. You get back to the College World Series, and I believe lost one in the College World Series in 89.
Yes. As we did we lost in the Valley Tournament to Indiana State at our home ballpark. And people were like grumbling. I wouldn't say booing, but there was a lot of grumbling in the stands Okay, because remember in '88 we'd gone to Omaha, made a good run. '89 they thought we were going to be loaded, and obviously were, but we lost to Indiana State, and people were kind of grumbling. So they sent us off to Fresno State to play in the regional. Well, we lost to Michigan. We beat Portland, we beat Pepperdine, and the third game we got blown out by Michigan. So we get in the losers bracket. So all of a sudden you get in the losers bracket. We're playing Fresno State, and they have 3 first-round drafts in their lineup, and we have to beat them right after we got spanked by Michigan. Well, we had a freshman named Tyler Green, who was green in the true sense of the word, but very gifted. He ended up being a first-round draft. Actually played in the big leagues and pitched in an all-star game. But he was the guy we threw. We had a really good game. Wedge did a great job kind of molding him. And then the 6th inning, we have a small lead, and we go to Newland, who I said was lights out, and beat him, I think, 6-4. All right, well, then the next day, we got to come back and beat Michigan twice after they just blistered us the day before, and we do. So we go to Omaha after coming through the losers bracket. So in Omaha, we beat Arkansas the first game and then lose to Florida State. So, okay, we're in the losers bracket. Well, then we come back, beat Arkansas, beat Florida State twice to do the first year they did the winner-take-all because there were 2 brackets. And when you got to the finals, it was winner-take-all. Now it's 2 out of 3. But in those years, it was winner-take-all. So we played Texas for the national championship, beat them 5-3.
Take me to the moment you won. What was that like?
Wow. You trying to get me to tear up or what here? That's a memory. That's one of those memories, it's like, for me, the moon landing and JFK and, different things. You always know where you were. Well, that's one when you talk to any Shocker fan, they're like, okay, I know exactly where I was. I know what I was doing. A lot of them were at the game. But, yeah, Greg Brummett strikes out. Greg Pate, who was a pinch hitter. I still have the Kennedy call that I'll listen to occasionally. And, of course, Mike Kennedy's legendary. So listen to that call, and I listened to it not that long ago. It's something that's with you forever. It's kind of a numb feeling. And the game was at 11, so the game's over at like 2. I just remember going back to the hotel, just sitting in my room, just numb. And this before you didn't have to deal with 3,000 texts and text. That wasn't there. So people that could find you are calling the hotel, phone. And eventually you get to everybody. But I remember sitting there just, oh my, this is like the coolest thing ever. Then obviously we had a pretty good party that night. Went through a good part of the night.
Sure.
But here's one thing I remember. The next day we get up, not too early, drive back. Police escort from Topeka, Highway Patrol, from Topeka to Wichita. And the bus goes over the hill. We're going down 21st from the turnpike. We get over the hill, and we see a packed X Stadium. We had no idea what to expect. We just knew there was going to be a welcome back party. Packed. Okay, so Kennedy, we're walking in from left field, and everybody's standing up. Everybody's going insane, crazy. And we have this little, welcome back where Mike Kennedy's the MC. And to Mike's credit, he kind of gave him a hard time. Hey, 3 weeks ago, you were like all booing them, when they lost here to Indiana State. How about those Shockers? He's going there, and of course, yeah, let's go. So we're there with a packed house. It was beautiful, priceless memories. Prayed through downtown Wichita, trip to the White House. We went, and it was George Bush Sr. So in the Rose Garden, it was like a whirlwind tour of everything. I couldn't buy a drink or a food that whole dinner. I was like, I hate for next year to start. I'm really enjoying when I walk in bars. People are, Kemnitz, I got you. So it was beautiful. And
How old were you?
Was that a video, Blake?
Let's do the math here. I was probably 32 or 3. So it was 89. Wow. So, yeah.
You're my age.
Oh, I was a young.
A little older than me.
Yeah, I was
That's
32,
amazing.
33, and life was just beautiful.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a ride.
I think Blake's got a video of it.
Oh, my God. Here we go.
Who's pitching there?
Greg
That's
Brummett.
Brummett. He was at a game last weekend.
Wow. And that's Wedge catching?
Yes. There's me and Gene and Cliff
Oh,
Gustafson.
my gosh.
Stop that right there. It's Lauren Hibbs, me and Gene. We're hugging, bouncing around. And Cliff Gustafson, who's legendary and one of the most gracious guys ever. I have that picture in my basement. I freeze framed it, but Coach Gustafson just being gracious and great. But yeah, there's Brummett's mother. Yeah, that's Linda.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I still tear up when when Winslow coming off, he got hurt like in the 6th inning. But just.
That is the coolest thing.
And that was Brent Musburger, I believe, that was calling the game there.
I'll have to listen to that Kennedy one. I've never even thought about listening to that.
Yeah, it's easy to find, and it was him and Casey Scott, and of course, it was a slider. It was 1-2 count, and you could just picture it right there, and priceless.
Would Wedge call the games?
Yes, and that was a big deal with us. The whole Gene years, our catchers called the game. I had 19 guys that I coached at Wichita State that pitched in the big leagues. And I always felt like I had a great relationship with the pitchers, but the catchers were my guys. It's like, we got to figure these guys out. And I think we had 6 catching the big leagues, but they called their own game because we felt like they have a better feel. They need to learn the game, and the pitchers need to be able to call it off if they don't want to throw a certain pitch. But it's like, you guys learn the game. Don't turn into robots where you're looking over there, from the coach. And most do call it. We never did. And we felt it served us well because you have better pace on the mound and your guys are forced to learn the game.
You think that helped in recruiting catchers?
100%. Yes.
This is going to be
Absolutely. And we'd have our guys go out into pro ball. I don't think it's a coincidence that 6 of them got in the big leagues because they knew the game. And, our pro buddies that were either scouts and said, no, I want your pitchers and catchers, they understand the game, position guys too. It's like, we like signing your guys because our managers in development love them. And so we got that all the time, but it definitely helped them.
The success didn't stop at the turn of the decade. 3 consecutive College World Series trips from 91 to 93, led by Major League talent, Darren Dryford, Doug Marabelli, and others. How early could you tell that some of these guys, you knew that they were going to be big leaguers?
Well, here's what was beautiful in basically all the years. We recruited primarily high school guys. Occasionally JC, hardly ever transfers. It was high school guys because we knew we were going to develop them. And you didn't have near the turnover because you recruit guys and Gene said this many times. I think we had a really great eye for talent. And guys that maybe were athletes or maybe crude or underseen or, kind of, everybody said you guys used to find guys under rocks. But we loved going to the small towns or whatever and find a PJ Forbes or somebody like that or a Hooper or a Brandon Baird in Enid or a Braden Looper in Mangum, Oklahoma. We loved that and had a lot of success with that. But we had a track record for developing guys. And the scouts saw that too. So it's like, okay, as a freshman, you're going to do this. And then each year we expect you to be better. Like I said earlier, when somebody was going out into summer ball, it's like, all right, here are the things you're going to work on. You're going to come back better or worse. If you just go through the motions, you're going to come back worse. Summer ball is not just going to make you better. And so you challenge them, and most came back better. Okay, so there was a system of developing guys, and it was kind of like plugged in, like, okay, Wichita State guys get better. When they go out into pro ball, they're going to do well, and they've had a ton of big leaguers. So early on, if somebody succeeded, it's like boom, 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 and we use that in recruiting. I remember talking to, I was recruiting coordinator for all of it, Gene's years, but with pitchers, the family would say, well, what's your coaching philosophy? And I'd say, my coaching philosophy is what's going to make your son click. Everybody's different. I don't have a cookie cutter, by God, you're going to conform to how I coach. I'd say I'm going to conform to you. You know, from a physical standpoint, not everybody's the same. Not everybody has the same delivery. You got to be under control, balanced position, throw out front, but everybody's different. So I'm going to figure out what makes you work from a physical standpoint. From a mental standpoint, same thing. I said, I prefer the hug you and love you style, but if I have to get in your ass, I will. So I said, it's up to you. If you want to come here, it's kind of like the old, if you want to be a part of greatness, go for it. If not, that's it. So we'll find somebody that does. Yep. So we use that in recruiting, but it was just development and a history of guys that had been in the big leagues. And, you know, I could sit there and say, hey, I don't know if you're going to pitch in the big leagues, but I've had 19 that did. I don't know if you're going to be an All-American or whatever, but I've had 21. I've had 20 freshman All-American. So the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And obviously that helps in recruiting, because in recruiting you sell what you have. At Wichita State from 86 on, we had to deal with no football. And the people that recruit against us going, no college life, no football, blah, blah, blah. So you sell what you have. If I was at a football school, OU, for example, I'd take them to football games and suck up the atmosphere, but we didn't have it. So what we sold was you're treated like a major sport. Our facilities are second to none. And look at our development. Look at the guys we've had in the big leagues. If you want to come in here and be treated like a major sport, this is where you need to be. I said, you don't labor in obscurity here. And we would always say, hey, if you don't like pressure, don't come here. Because if you hang a slider in the 8th inning and you're going to get a drink at Quick Trip the next morning, they're going to ask you how come you didn't throw a fastball. People know who you are.
Sure.
So it's one of those, you have a great thing, sell what you have.
During the heyday, would you guys recruit blue chip prospects, the same guys at Texas and OU? Would you recruit those guys, or were you always trying to find the hidden gems, or was it just a combination of all of that?
I love that question. And it's a little bit of a combination, but there was a national writer who's like legendary, guy named Jim Callis. And he wrote a story, this would have been late 80s, 90s, and he ranked the top recruiting schools. Okay. And of course, we were in our run of Omaha, and I was recruiting coordinator. So he put us like in the top 10, Wichita State. And he said, Gene Stevenson and recruiting coordinator Brent Kemnitz. What he said is they go after the second tier guy and develop him, which I love that. Okay. Because we always figured that if you're going after the so-called blue chip, high draft, they're going to sign anyway. So we didn't spend a ton of time on those guys because it was one of those deals, let them battle over them, and it may look good for the whole press or whatever in the winter when your recruiting class is second or third or top, whatever. Our recruiting classes were normally top 20, sometimes top 10, but we went after, like Jim Callis said, second-tier guy that we were going to develop. And he said that in there. He said, but they have more All-Americans than anybody. Now, the exception, there's a couple that will jump out at you. Darren Dreifert, he didn't do all the showcase stuff, so he was kind of under the radar. And he ended up being a 10th-round pick of the Mets and got offered, I think, $100,000, and that was 1989-90, so that's big money in those days. But we kept him. And he went on to be the second pick behind Alex Rodriguez.
Wow.
And then the biggest one probably to fit what you're talking about was Pelfrey, Mike Pelfrey. Heights kid. First time I saw him pitch when he was a sophomore, I'm like, whoa. Because, in Wichita, all the people are saying, hey, man, there's a kid down in Derby, or there's a kid at Heights, or have you seen the kid at Mays? And, sometimes they're right. A lot of times they're not. Well, I'd already heard about, hey, there's a big kid over at Heights. You need to go see us. What's his name? Last name's Pelfrey. Well, I remember the first time I saw him was like when I'm just bouncing around random at ballparks. He's stolen at McAdams. And, of course, me and Mike Pelfrey are great friends. I tell the story all the time. When I walked in and saw him, I'm like, oh, my God, I didn't know he was that good. So we recruited Pelfrey thinking there's no chance he's going to college, okay? And fortunately, and I laugh about this, he loved basketball. So his senior year at Heights, he played basketball. So when he came into baseball, he wasn't in shape. So all the scouts came in right out of the chute to see him, and he wasn't what he was later in the year. So a lot of them are like, well, he ain't what we thought. Some of them, or he must be hurt, or kind of wrote him off. And we'd already signed him with the idea. My mindset was, we can't let Pelfrey sign somewhere else, even if he's not going to go here. That's a bad look. So Pelfrey loved it. He loved the program. So we signed him. But for me, it was like, hey, I know you're probably going to sign. A couple of breaks we had. One was the basketball. He came in not in shape. And I had a couple of my scout buddies calling me after that game because we're on the bus heading to Creighton. And I had David Chad, who's a godparent to my daughter. And I'm godparent to his. And he's a scout. At the time, it would have probably been the Marlins. He goes, well, this may have been a good day for you. He didn't look, he was like upper 80s, still good. Ended up that spring like 92 to 4 to, whatever. He said, some people may he may slip. So you may keep him. I'm thinking, no chance we're keeping him, but okay. Well, here's another break we had. His agent was Scott Boras, who's probably the best in the business, and he had been Dryford's, and that's kind of another Heights guy. So that was probably the tie-in. Well, Scott was a big go-to-college guy because he didn't think too many guys were ready to handle the pro thing at 18. Okay, so he was a big push him to college. Well, he hired Boras, so that helped us.
So you could have agents in college?
Not on paper, not technically, advisor, whatever term you want to use, but everybody spun around it. That was his advisor. Okay, I don't think you could sign anything, but that was how they framed it. But yeah, I mean, they all had guys that you would go to. I think it becomes official. You sign whatever probably after. It's more of a good old boy, not good old boy, but your word, that kind of thing. But he did stick with Boras and had him through his career. But Boras he told him, he said, hey, you're not ready to handle the rigors of pro ball. Well, I remember when Dryford slipped in the draft, one, because he wasn't quite what they thought right out of the chute, and he had Boras. He slipped in the draft, and I remember him sitting in my office in June of, this would have been, he was with us 03, 4, and 5, so it would have been June of 02. And I said, look, I know you want to sign. You're not big into school. He was over the school thing. He just wanted to go play. I said, but this will be the best thing that's ever happened to you. When you leave here 3 years from now, you will be the best pitcher in college baseball, and you'll be ready to handle it mentally. And we laughed. And both those became true, by the way. But we laugh about that now because he said, when you were telling me that, I was so not into that. But here's what's beautiful is he ended up getting his degree, had an All-American career for us, first-round draft, 12-year big leaguer, dear friend, very supportive of the program, still coaches over at Capon. But we laugh about that all the time, is about how he was like ready to kill me because, it's like, oh, my God. Well, his first semester, he got like a 4.0 at Wichita State. So I went to him, I said, hey, man, you're killing this school thing. I said, don't be giving up on baseball and thinking you're going to med school or anything. He's laughing. He goes, I think you're safe.
A stat that blows me away is Wichita State made the NCAA tournament every year in the 90s.
Yeah.
Every year in the 90s.
We went 28 times. And 01 is the first year that we didn't go, and it broke a string of like 14 or 15. We didn't go in 01. It was a bubble team. I thought we should have. But, yeah, it was just a given. And we hosted, I think, 8 regionals at X Stadium and went to Omaha College World Series 91, 92, 93, 96, but hosted 8 of the 10 years. And like you said, a regional was like a no-brainer. Well, you're going to a regional. And our fans got spoiled with that. It was like, oh, they're going to a regional. Well, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how hard it is until you're not going. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, that was just a mindset that was built in.
Reached the championship 2 out of 3 years.
Yeah, we won in 89, but played in the finals in 91 and 93.
Amazing run. God. Just insane. Insane amount of winning.
It is.
Yeah, and X Stadium in those years at the regionals sold out.
Yeah.
I mean, we won it in 91.
The hill just covered
just
with people.
packed.
Like, how fun would that be to be able to
No
do that?
doubt.
God
I hear
damn.
that all the time too. We brought in our coolers and it was the
Yeah.
best ever. And I have frat guys from that day saying it was the best. But 91 we beat Cal to go. 92 we beat Oklahoma State to go. And then 93 we had to go to Georgia Tech. But in 96 beat Rice. And here's one of the speeches I give. I gave it to my pitchers forever. But when I speak to groups, I still go with this story. I'm a big deal that concentration will eliminate tension. If you're shooting a free throw or you're up there and the bases are loaded and you got or you got a tennis serve or a putt, whatever, you got to stay locked in. So I'm big on concentration will eliminate tension. So one of the stories I'd always give, like 96, we're playing Rice, and if we win that game, we're going to Omaha. So it's ninth inning. You go out there, you get 3 outs, and you're going to Omaha. Well, what are 8,000 people doing? Omaha, Omaha, Omaha. It's 8,000 screaming that. Well, if you're locked in, you feel the energy, and it helps you focus. If you're not locked in, it works in reverse. You're like, oh, my God, that's right. You get all fidgety.
The pressure.
The pressure. So concentration will eliminate tension. I preached that forever.
That's great.
Still preach that. But whether you're shooting a free throw and you hear the place going crazy, you just got your process, your breathing, and you shoot your free throw. Well, that's certainly the case, in baseball, but in this case, X Stadium.
Man, what a time and what a job you guys did. Even in the 2000s, pretty solid too. 2 super regionals in 07 against UC Irvine and then 08 with Buster Posey and Florida State. Wichita State had good teams in the 2000s too.
Jack and I were young bucks. We went down to Stillwater when you guys beat them with Andy Dirks
in
and
08.
Connor Gillespie.
Okay.
Yeah, we were young.
Me and Dirks
down there.
Dirks is like the TV guy for the Tigers.
Andy
Okay.
Dirks had a great big league career.
Yes, and he got hurt, but he's still like one of their TV guys.
Didn't Connor
Radio
Gillespie
guys.
that year hit like 420,
Oh, and Connor,
430?
great hitter. He came in recently. Me and Dirks are in regular contact, but both of them had nice big league careers.
Mm-hmm.
But 07, here's what happened: we host a regional, beat Arizona, packed X Stadium. Well, the way it was drawn up, we were probably going to have to go to Texas to get to win. Well, Irvine upset Texas, so that forced them to come here in 07. All right. And X Stadium sold out, national TV. But what helped Irvine is they were like all seniors. They beat us 1-0 and 3-2. Great game, sold out. But it was like they were loaded with older guys. And then 88, we had to go to Stillwater. That's what you're talking about. Won the regional there in Stillwater. Once again, that's my old stomping grounds. And they sent us to Florida State. Now, the Buster Posey memories aren't as fun. They're not as
No,
good.
they're not.
But we did beat him the first game, Rob Musgrave. And then they beat us game 2 and 3 to go to Omaha.
He was just a home run machine.
Oh, yeah, you could fool him. And I've talked to him. They have the Buster Posey Award. So I've talked to him 2 or 3 times when, it comes back. And, he remembers. I said, well, they're pleasant memories for you. I would think you're remembering that. But he's just such a humble guy, such a good guy.
That's cool.
Man, and now you transition to assistant AD. How's that been?
I absolutely love it. Yeah, but, when I moved over in 2016, which 10 years ago, so I've been in 10 years.
Wow.
I had guys in pro ball reach out. Wedge was one of them. Hey, he was tied in with Toronto. You can come run our minor leagues. The next steps, bullpen coach in the big leagues, which is what I always said I wanted to do. Not pitching coach. That's too much stress. I want to sit down in the bullpen and light guys' shoestrings on fire and stuff like that.
Answer the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, he looks great. Let's go. Tell crazy stories. That always appealed to me. He said, dude, I know what you want to be, what you always want to do. Come run our minor leagues for a couple years, and you'll be a bullpen coach in the big leagues. I said, you know what? Thank you. That does sound appealing. I said, but I think I'm really going to like my new deal, because I'm going to travel with basketball. We have some fundraising deals going on. I said, give me this first year here, and we'll see. And that was fair with him. It's like, no, I get it. That's cool. Well, after I did it a few months, I said, I ain't leaving this. I said, I wouldn't trade the coaching stuff. It was a blast, great relationships. But now it's like my second career. I'm having so much fun doing it. And I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. A lot of guys coach, and they're like, oh, man, I wish I could go back to that. I loved it and wouldn't trade it, but I've locked in on my new career, 10 years already. And having a blast.
Was that Fred and Ron's senior year? Were you
16?
Part of the...
No, unfortunately. And I've become really good friends with Baker. I've met Fred, don't know him well. But as far as Evan Wessel and Baker and that whole crew, become really good friends with them. My last year coaching was their senior year. So when I came over in 17, the first year was when we went to Indianapolis, and the second year, San Diego. Third year, we didn't make the NCAA, but made the NIT Final Four and went to Madison Square Garden. Then 20 was COVID. So I absolutely love traveling with basketball and the NCAA tournament this time of year. So I am envious that I wasn't on that 13 Final Four run, or with 14 when they're, what was 35-0, and then 15 when they go to Omaha and BKU. I wish I was a part of those. I was watching them as a baseball coach, but just phenomenal years. And Shocker basketball in those days was a great decade, and I think we're heading in the right direction there now with Coach Mills.
You're kind of seeing something similar with the start of Paul Mills' career as you do with Marshall, where
you're it almost parallels. Yes, every year there's a jump.
They're a little bit
and
better.
The thing I was telling all of our people, the year that we won the NIT in 2011, we lost to Indiana State, because I remember I was in the press box at Dallas Baptist doing my radio show before the game with Kennedy. Or no, he was with basketball, so I was doing it. I forget who took, maybe Shane Dennis, but it was like I was doing my show. And I'm listening to the basketball, and we lose to Indiana State. And it's like, God, it was like a gut punch. And so everybody's like, well, it looks like we're back to the NIT, because that's where we'd gone at 2010. Well, then we win it. Well, then it became like the coolest thing ever. And then the rest, 12 we get in, 13 Final Four, 15 undefeated. So I can just rattle them all off. But it is similar. Last year we get in the NIT. This year, it's like, okay, lost South Florida, really wanted to do the NCAA tournament, but okay, now we're going to host a game, beat Wyoming, went down and spanked Oklahoma State, and what a great game last night against Tulsa. But it parallels, and you can sell that. People are like, okay, if you're trending up, people are excited to see where this is headed, and I'm a huge Paul Mills
That's
fan.
what Ron was telling us. He's like, when they were recruiting him is when WC won the NIT in 2011. He's like, okay, that's something.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
No question. And we can do those same things. And I was at Greg Marshall. He was so much fun, still a friend of Greg's. But Coach Mills, just a phenomenal basketball coach in person.
It'll be interesting to see what this offseason is like. I wonder what, just with the new era behind the scenes, how it all goes down. Because for the first time in a while, there's a nucleus that you want to keep.
100%. I was having this conversation. Emily Hebert's our head of NIL and legendary volleyball player, Wichita State. Work with her every day, so we're kicking around all the options today. But yeah, you keep TJ Williams, the local guy. You would think he wants to stay here. Will Berg.
He's got to stay here.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. He's got. There's no choice.
No question.
He must stay.
Yes, he can be a rock star in this city.
Yes.
If I bounce into him in the arena,
if you
I
lose
will go
TJ
on my
Williams,
skit.
like,
you're setting yourself up forever. If you
what are we
stay
doing here?
Yes. And I think he loves it here. So I have no inside info. but he has to stay. Will Berg made a huge jump.
Oh, Berg was a 7-footer that can make their
And
free
he
throws
just
in college
kept-
is so good.
He just kept getting better.
Yeah.
And Dylan Battee.
Yep. Also another guy that
huge
got
jump.
good.
Yep.
Yeah, so everybody got better. So we can have a good nucleus. And Wichita people, and you guys know this, we will love you if you love us.
Mm-hmm.
If you come in here and prove that you love our city and want to be here, we love you. Now, the guys that are always looking for that next stop, we don't necessarily embrace that guy. But we know what we have here. People, I use this all the time, and I use it in recruiting. People come here and stay. They don't leave. It's a special place. So if we keep the core, and then we'll do well in the portal, we've got the makings to really get this exciting. And I sell this all the time. We all do. A packed Charles Koch Arena, 10,000 plus, is electric. It's a social. Wichita State men's basketball is a social event. It's crucial to the city. It gives us pride nationwide. So those are things that I know you guys get. But if we get back to packing the arena, Henry Leavitt back in the day, but Charles Koch Arena now, priceless.
It impacts the local economy too. When they're
100%.
Even when they're on the road, people go to restaurants and bars. We'll get together with
100%.
family and friends. It has such a big impact on the city.
Economics and like a Coke or a Cargill or the big companies recruiting your people. It's like, all right, here's something for your family to do in the winter. And they see it and they embrace it. And a lot of our biggest boosters are Coke people. So
I was reading an article Taylor Eldridge posted today. He said, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he said with how they finished and how everybody's rallying around Paul Mills, that their NIL budget may have increased by like 50%.
yeah, I think it probably will go up, and it's an investment you have to make. And that's one of the things people, complain about NIL. And my comeback is, hey, I don't necessarily like it either, but it's not going away.
Yeah.
Right.
We better embrace it, and it's an investment you're making in the athletic department, the university, and the city.
Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of Taylor Eldridge, when they drew Tulsa again in the NIT, I was like, man, has Wichita State ever played a team 4 times in a season? And of course, Taylor's on it. Yes, they had. Taylor did the research. This is the first time Wichita State has played an opponent 4 times in the same season since 1936, 90 years ago.
Look at Taylor. I love Taylor Eldridge.
Yeah.
Oh, he is a treasure.
I sat with him at the Oklahoma State game Sunday night. It's like, I always joke, and I go, I am media. I have this little media deal. What do you mean I am media? So I was sitting with him during the Oklahoma State game Sunday night, but he's got so much information. And
Oh, he's the best in the business.
I love
Who
I
are the
love
teams
Taylor.
that we played?
They played in the Central Intercollegiate Conference in 1936.
Who do we play 4 times?
Emporia State, Fort Hays, Pitt State, and Southwestern.
We played all of them 4 times.
Yep.
Let's go.
Yep.
Yeah.
90 years ago,
No way he pulled that up.
he pulled that up.
Where do you even
It
find
does-
that?
Yeah, exactly. Does not surprise me.
Yeah, Taylor's the best in the business.
Big fan. Yes.
Another A+ season from him, and I'm really excited for this offseason. Keep that nucleus. Go out and got a lot of scoring. Gonna have to.
Yeah,
fill it.
Giles. I mean, how cool would it be if he was like a sophomore in the
Oh.
old system? It's like, hey, he was only a sophomore.
He'd be going to
It's
KU
kind of like
probably.
Baker and Fred and those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Brent, that's about all I had, man. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Dave talked to me about doing this. I said, Dave, that's my wheelhouse. You kidding me? Yes, 100%. I want to do that. So thank you for having me. I'm honored.
You got anything for us?
Not that I can think of. I do need a picture for Twitter. Everybody gives me a hard time because all my buddies that were on, it's X now, but Twitter, I gave them so much hassle. I'm like, dude, what are you doing on Twitter? What is that? Now, in 2019, I'm in this promotions role, what I do now. So it's like I do it all the time, and everybody's like, dude, We see you. We follow you. It's pretty entertaining, but it's free pub and it's good pub. So, yeah, we got to get a little picture of us here.
We will. We take a picture after the pod with every
I love
guest.
it. Awesome.
So we'll do that.
Good stuff.
Any finals?
I don't. Just thank you so much. Love reliving the Wichita State stuff. And, gosh, if we can get that baseball program even a resemblance to where it was. Because Packing X Stadium would be so
it's
freaking
priceless.
cool.
And I'm a huge Brian Green fan. He's so respectful of the history. He's great to Gene, great to me. So we need that to happen, and I believe in those guys.
All right.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing it.
Perfect.
Thanks
Thank you.
again, sir.